Thank you everyone for joining today. My name's James Patterson and I'm delighted to welcome you to today's session. So we're here to talk about something that affects every business, regardless of their size or sector, and that is the evolving threat landscape. Joining me today is my colleague Spencer Lear, the Xperience Chief Revenue Officer, and Spencer will be providing you with information on the rollout plans for Inforcer and what they mean for your business. I'm delighted to also have on our call today Will Connor. Will is one of the Inforcer co-founders, and today he will be introducing the Inforcer solution and will also providing you with an understanding of why it is so important in helping us, Xperience, to secure your Microsoft 365 environment. So thank you both for joining us today.
You're welcome.
We've preempted some of the most frequent questions that we get asked. However, if you do have a question, the Q&A is open and we'll endeavour to get back to you today on these if they haven't been answered in this session. So to start, I wanted to talk a little bit about what we mean when we say the threat landscape is evolving. So we now hear daily about cyber attacks in the news, disrupting operations and costing businesses significantly. But it's really not just media hype. The threat landscape really is changing, and it's changing so rapidly and becoming far more dangerous. So why does this matter? Well, it matters because cyber attacks are not only increasing in frequency, but they're also becoming more sophisticated, more targeted, and more damaging to the businesses they are targeting. The Microsoft 365 environment is an absolute goldmine for attackers, and the reason for this is because it sits at the heart of your business operations. Email, collaboration, file storage, identity is all there, so that makes it a very high value target for cyber attacks. There's a lot of stake here, and it's your data, whether it's sensitive internal documents, customer information, or intellectual property, is all incredibly valuable. A breach doesn't just mean downtime, it can lead to financial loss, reputational damage, and serious regulatory penalties. And when we speak to regulation, compliance is no longer a nice to have, it's a must. Frameworks such as Cyber Essentials, ISO 27001 and the NCSC guidelines, they're all setting the bar for what good security looks like. Staying compliant is not just about ticking the boxes, it's about protecting your business, your customers, and your reputation. And it's all about building trust. So here at Xperience, we are taking this responsibility incredibly seriously, and we are continuing to invest in the tools, the technologies, and the practices that help safeguard your environment. So today, alongside Spencer and Will, I'm very excited to introduce our latest step forward in protecting your organisation, Inforcer. So with this, I'd like to hand over to Will, who's going to talk about the investment being made by Microsoft and why that becomes so important for your 365 tenant management. He'll be talking about and providing some examples on the pace of change and, most importantly, how Inforcer helps us to set, secure and monitor the foundations of your business. He'll also touch on some examples of how the tooling will be used within your 365 tenant by us at Xperience. So over to you, Will.
Perfect. Thanks a lot, James. And thanks everybody for tuning in. So I'm just going to quickly take control and we can get started. So as James mentioned, Inforcer and Xperience have partnered to help to secure all of your Microsoft 365 tenants, not just once or not just today, but continuously, which I think is really, really important and often has been overlooked because it is a really, really new sort of sector, to be honest. Managing the Microsoft tenant, managing the cloud, it is relatively new. So I want to talk a little bit about why it's so important. So just as a quick introduction, I'm one of the co-founders. We are UK based. We only work with managed service providers, so businesses like Xperience Group. There's actually over 120 365 experts within our business, and we are growing quick. And between all of the managed service providers we work with, we're actually helping to secure over 50,000 businesses globally. And I think probably one of the most important points is that we have an exclusive partnership with Microsoft. And so there's just a few pictures here of our team in amongst the community, but the final picture here is a chap called Lior. He's one of the big global business directors of a product called Microsoft Intune. It's a mobile device management platform that quite likely, if you're already having your tenant managed by Xperience, they'll already be using. It's part of the business premium stack. And this was him actually announcing to a room of a few hundred MSPs the partnership, which is Intune for MSPs, and Inforcer were actually one of the founding vendors of that initiative. So what we're going to cover a little bit today is the platform. I mean, the key points here is that we provide best practice to Xperience. They have their own baseline that they're building out, and they actually have already built out. But by partnering with Inforcer, we provide them with the latest and the greatest when it comes to security policies, the things that have just been released by Microsoft, but also we've partnered with the Center for Internet Security. This is a globally known business which is backed by the US government that produce some guidelines and best practices around security for 365. So we've partnered with them to be able to provide our MSPs with all of those best practices. Every time they release new updates, they become available in our platform to be delivered. We have proactive monitoring and alerting around both policies, so things like conditional access for MFA, changes to those sorts of policies, which are critical, but also wider tenant changes as well. So if there's a bad actor in the tenant or if there's anything untoward, we're going to be monitoring and alerting the team at Xperience on those changes, and that just isn't available out of the box today with Microsoft. Another thing that isn't available out of the box is backup of the configuration. I'm sure you likely already are backing up your data, but what's also quite critical is that you back up the security configuration in your tenant. So if there ever was a problem as part of your disaster recovery plan, you've got all of that data backed up, but also you'll have the configuration of the tenant so you can get back to exactly how you were before there was a problem, potentially a breach. You can get back there as quickly as possible. We've got some great custom reporting, which I'm going to show you at the end of the presentation today to see, so you'll see exactly how you're going to benefit from some of that information that we can get out from Inforcer. We've got some automation, which is really important to actually reduce the amount of potential human errors that there is, because Microsoft is so complex. There is so many buttons to press when you are setting up policies, and having some automation in place to ensure the right policies are deployed is really, really important. There's some great dashboards, which again can be shared directly with you guys. We've embedded AI into our platform to make it easier for the team at Xperience to know what the impact of policies is going to be. And as already mentioned, we have an exclusive partnership with Microsoft, but on top of that, we actually provide regular updates to our partners. So to Xperience Group, every single month, we run a session with them to let them know what's changing in Microsoft. And that is really important to make sure that your tenants also can continue to be at the cutting edge of security when it comes to Microsoft and the investment that you're making into Microsoft. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the investment Microsoft are making and why we're seeing this security takeover. Within the Microsoft license, you're getting access to some really brilliant enterprise-grade tools. And I would say over the last 5 or so years, there's been a real shift in the standard of some of these tool sets, to be honest. So things like Microsoft Intune, things like Microsoft Defender and Entra, these tools might not have been used across your environments 5 to 10 years ago, but there has been a significant shift in the tool sets. So this is the Gartner Magic Quadrant. They rank products in all different software categories, and in this one in particular is the endpoint protection quadrant. You see that back in 2018, Microsoft was very much middle of the road for their endpoint protection. And in just a sort of 6-year span here, Microsoft ended up at the very top right, which is a visionary leader. And I think some of the reasons for this is, well, they're outspending all of their competition. 20 billion committed to security R&D alone over a 5-year period is quite crazy. To put that into context, that's more than a lot of those businesses make in revenue a year. When you split out over the 5-year period. On top of that, they have more engineers than any of their competitors as well. So they have 34,000 full-time engineers working on Microsoft security. Now with the addition of AI helping them as well, there is so much innovation going into the platforms. There's so much work that just enables those tools to be able to protect you even better. The challenge is with all of those updates, there's a lot of work that needs to be done on the Xperience side to actually maintain your tenants at a great standard and keep you on track with the pace of change of Microsoft. And another really important stat here is there is 78 trillion security signals per day. So a security signal is basically a signal that there's been some sort of security issue. And so Microsoft have 78 trillion of these per day. It's more data than anybody else. And if we just go forward to that slide again here with their competitors, to put this into context, CrowdStrike, who are right up there in the top right with Microsoft, they have 1 trillion security signals per day. So they have 78 times more data than their nearest comparable product. It is insane. And so if you take all of that data and all of that investment and all of those engineers, they can help to protect your business more effectively because they see more things. They can build new features to protect you against more things. So I think because of all of that, we're seeing the Microsoft Secure Score becoming one of the most used metrics in cybersecurity. This is something that likely, if you haven't already spoken to Xperience Group about, they will probably be speaking to you about once you get rolled out with Inforcer. This is something that we have some alerting on. This is something that we have some great reporting around and the recommendations that come out of Microsoft. Now, I think another driver for this is cyber insurance providers are actually starting to recognize Secure Score as a metric as well. So there is a fair chance that in your next cyber insurance form that you may have to do to get your premiums, you may be asked what your Secure Score is. And of course, in case you've never heard of Secure Score, I wanted to give you a bit of detail. So the Microsoft definition is it's a way for you to assess your current security posture, and it's specifically looking at the Microsoft workloads within 365. Now, what that actually means is, well, of course, it's a percentage based on how many of the security features you roll out. The higher, the better with most percentages. And the key thing here is, as Microsoft add critical security features, you need to have them rolled out onto your tenant. Otherwise, that Secure Score will decrease. So you can roll out the best security posture you could possibly do on day one. But if you don't continuously evolve that and evolve the posture proactively, the Secure Score will decrease over time. So I also wanted to bring in here a little bit around the modern workplace. This is something that gets talked about a lot within the Microsoft world. So the definition from Microsoft here is a collection of tools that use cloud technology to help businesses improve productivity and collaboration. Now, the first thing that I thought when I read that definition is, well, what about security? And I think this is a really important point where the tenant itself out the box, if you guys go from, say, a business standard license, so this is an example of the things you get access to in business standard, there's really almost no security available in this. When you move to a business premium tenant, you unlock all of this enterprise grade security. But because the tenant natively is built for productivity and collaboration, they don't enable any of these security features. So the team at Xperience need to go and unlock all of this great security that you're investing in through your licensing. And each one of these boxes needs to be properly configured. It needs to be built out to effectively manage the balance between security and usability, which is all stuff that the guys at Xperience are already doing with their baseline. But they actually need to go and enable all of those things. And if you don't, you just lose out on some of the functionality that you're already paying for. And within a business premium license, if we kind of reduce that down into something a little bit more digestible, there is some really great security features here that you can add in. And of course, you can bolt on other tools if you need to, potentially to increase the security or to have multiple layers. But within that business premium license, there's a lot of functionality. But the caveat is it's only as good as the actual deployment of those policies and then continuously improving them as new features come out. So you may have previously, or you may still have servers on site. And I imagine that a lot of your businesses are starting to transition to a more cloud-first world. And the way we see it is the tenant in a cloud-first environment is that new server. It's the place where all of your data, it's the place where all your users and your devices are connecting back to. And your tenant needs to be proactively maintained, monitored, and secured, just like your server would have been, or maybe your servers still are. And in the same vein, the way that we see identity is, well, it's very much now the perimeter. So this is what a traditional perimeter may have looked like. You may recognize this. But in today's cloud-first world, your identity is that perimeter. And it's really, really complex. There is a huge amount of different areas to this attack surface, and as new features come out in Microsoft, as you add new items into your environment, you've got to layer up more and more security to protect that identity. So I've talked a little bit about the change of pace in Microsoft, but I just wanted to give you some real world example of how much change there really is. So this is the Microsoft 365 roadmap. Currently in development, there is 695 new features. Launched in the last 2.5 years have been nearly 900 new features. And right now they're already rolling out 200. There is a huge amount of change that goes into the platforms. Now, not all of these are going to be relevant to your business. Not all of them are going to be specifically around security. But I wanted to do is I actually filtered all of this down, and I found that in the last 12 months, there was 50 changes to just the security products, just in Business Premium. So that is a huge amount of potential new security features that could have been rolled out. And again, not all 50 of these will be relevant, but even if there's 12 changes that you would want on your tenant, that's still an update every single month of the year. And that's why it's so important to be having your tenant proactively managed, because there's some amazing things that get released. I'll give you an example. So just last month, there was a policy type called token theft protection. So it's a huge challenge at the moment, actually, is having phishing which leads to token theft, and then basically hackers can use your MFA token. So essentially, Microsoft moved that from Entropy 2, which is in the enterprise licensing, they moved it into Business Premium. And that then became available in the lower licensing. But of course, Microsoft didn't turn it on. So if you want that feature, you need to go and have that policy built out by the team at Xperience, and they can roll those things out for you. Really important updates that often just aren't turned on by default. So the other things I wanted to cover here are, well, we've already talked about this. The tenants are insecure by default. They're built for productivity and collaboration. They need to be configured and maintained by an expert. And I mentioned the need for automation. There's a really interesting stat that I found where in 2024, 68% of all of the breaches were caused by poor configuration that was caused by human error. And that's why Xperience are investing in great tools to be able to automate some of the security rollout, tools like Inforcer that can enable the team to make sure that they define their best practice and they're easily able to actually roll them out through automation. And I know that there's some businesses out there who still are not fully rolled out with things like multi-factor authentication. And I thought this stat was really interesting that actually 99.9% of unauthorized login attempts could be blocked by enabling MFA. So it's really important. And I know that MFA is the base layer of the Xperience baseline and the things that they would be rolling out with Inforcer. So another thing that's probably worth mentioning is that there's more and more businesses, probably you guys on the webinar today, who are using cloud-based applications to run your business. So outside of 365, starting to use things like Sage Online, Dynamics 365. There's so many different tools that I can think of that are fully SaaS. And what's all quite similar about them is you're probably logging into them through single sign-on, which means that your identity in Microsoft holds the keys to the kingdom here. So, you can log into with one identity, with one email and one, through one connection through Microsoft, and it accesses all of these different tools. So that means that your identity is more important than it's ever been within Microsoft. So having a really clear and secure security posture that focuses on zero trust around the identity and looks at compliancy across the board for your devices and your endpoints is really, really important to start connecting that all together. And continuously improving your 365 security environment is really important to then maintain that high secure score. And ultimately, keeping up with those updates, having your tenant proactively managed is going to enable you to be more secure. But actually, on the flip side, it means you're getting the most out of your investment into Microsoft as well. So I've got a few examples here of how in the real world, Microsoft 365 security could have protected some breaches that you may have seen in the news. So we'll start here with a business called KNP. They're a transport business, or they were a transport business based in Northamptonshire. They actually had a hacker that guessed a weak employee password. They had no MFA, they had weak passwords, and they were actually in the end able to deploy ransomware that encrypted all of the company data. The ransom was £5 million, and ultimately the business was unable to recover the data. So you may have seen this in the news. It was quite big news in July. One of the oldest businesses in the UK completely shut down because of a cyber attack. And there were some really basic kind of controls that could have been in place here within 365 that could have stopped this attack. All focused here, I've gone down the business premium route, but there's policies like password protection. So this is going to make sure that you've got more complex specific passwords that have got bans on things that are commonly guessed. Things like conditional access, which will require multi-factor authentication. They'll block risky sign-ins, but also connecting it through to Intune so that you can have that fully managed, multi-faceted security approach. And then things like phishing-resistant MFA. So using stronger strengths of MFA also is really important. But just to give you some insight here, phishing-resistant MFA was only released about a year ago. So if you are not having your tenant proactively managed, you wouldn't even have access to some of these policies. Got another one here as well, which was it was actually NATO-aligned contractors, logistics firms, and media in the Netherlands who were being targeted around the NATO conference back in summer. And Microsoft 365 was the main target. They were using a lot of phishing attempts. They were trying to deliver malware. And ultimately actually trying to do session hijacking, so trying to get people's tokens for multi-factor. And the way that this could have been solved here is by having a number of different things in place. And that's why I think Microsoft is so important for security, because you can layer the security. There's this connective tissue between all of the different platforms that you just don't get with many other solutions, where you can connect your conditional access, things like phishing-resistant MFA, with your Intune compliance policies. And then you can connect that with your Defender XDR policies. There's so much connectivity between them, which allows you to create a much more cohesive security posture. And I'm going to just wrap up with a little focus around the pivot here to AI as well, because tenant security is really, really important if you are going on a journey to considering the use of things like Copilot as an AI platform within your business. And what's really interesting is that the foundation principle here shows you that the AI is only as trustworthy as the environment in which it operates. And the environment in which your AI is going to operate is your Microsoft tenant. So there's so many things that an AI can potentially connect to and look at. And it's really important to then have the right security protocols in place, making sure that the right people have the right access to the right things. You know, looking at your SharePoint sharing, looking at your site access, looking at who can view what is so important when considering your rollout for AI. And it all comes back to the tenant security. So there's some key things to consider. So who can access what? So they're using things like role-based access. There's protecting and governing your data, which is probably one of the most important pieces. Looking at things like data sensitivity, data classification, but also who can share and who can access what information within things like SharePoint. There's zero trust security, which is really important. That's really looking at all of these security features we've been talking about so far on the session. And then, of course, keeping watch by enabling auditing, having proactive threat monitoring, and also general threat detection as well. Now, I thought for this session, I would ask Copilot, what are the things that need to be protected in an SMB from AI? And Copilot was able to provide me with quite a lot of quite scary answers, to be honest. So these were the key things that we talked about, and this is anything from salary details, you know, being able to ask what your boss's salary is, all the way through to previous purchase histories, legal documentation. But the key thing here that Copilot finished with was there's even more than that. And once you start unpacking what an SMB needs to protect from AI, it's like peeling an onion. There are layers that you didn't even know were there. And this is just not to scare anybody, but this is just to show how much work needs to be done on the tenant, particularly around security and data governance, just to enable a really secure way of working with AI. I think AI is an amazing tool and should definitely be considered as a way to become more proactive and more productive. But it just is really important to do it in the right way. And ultimately, that's what businesses like Xperience are here for, to help you to solve that and go on that journey. So, key takeaways for me of the session would be Microsoft is insecure by default. You need to have your tenant properly configured. It may need an audit first. It may need to go through some updates, but that can all be done by the team at Xperience. Microsoft are releasing over 50 new features just for security every year in the business premium license. So there's even more in different licenses, and these need to be tested and then rolled out if they're appropriate. The secure score will drop if you don't apply those critical updates. Business Premium can offer you a pretty complete solution when it comes to security, but it needs to be properly configured. Your identity is more important than ever because it can connect you to more than just your 365 tenant, and tenant security is a mandatory precursor to AI readiness. So those are some of the key areas I wanted to touch on today. And just finally, before I finish, I've got some examples of some of the reports you can expect to see coming out of Inforcer once the team get rolling. So there's some great reporting around the audits that they can do on your tenant. So comparing your tenant against the Xperience standard, showing you where all those deviations are and building you a roadmap to get to a point where you're more secure, aligning to those great standards that the team have built out. MFA, here we've got a really nice report that the team can share with you guys to show you how many of your users are currently properly configured within the multi-factor authentication conditional access policies. We've got a really nice new assessment tool which has just been released in the Inforcer platform, which can compare you to different compliance frameworks such as CIS, and we've got a Cyber Essentials one coming before the end of the year, so the team can start bringing you into those different frameworks using the platform. We've got lots of different alerts that can be run, so we can be checking against things like secure score or new applications being created that maybe shouldn't have been. There's a lot of different alerts that can be created for your tenant. And then some great dashboards which can give the team visibility to help them to get to the bottom of different problems before it becomes an issue. So thanks a lot for your time, everybody. And Spencer, I'll hand back over to you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining the webinar. So I wanted to talk to you about what Inforcer means to you as an experienced client. So there's some key things here. So the first one is around policy enforcement. So it's going to monitor 365 and it's going to ensure that your security policies are up to date. It's going to do a daily config backup, which is not something which is standard in 365. So we'll talk about this, taking your baseline, taking your security configuration and making sure that that's backed up so that it can be recovered in the event of any issues that you have. Thirdly, it's going to give you real-time risk alerts. So what does that mean in the real world? It means if somebody tries to turn off a key security capability like multi-factor authentication, we will get an alert, we will be able to advise you, and we will be able to make an adjustment to switch it back on. But the point is that you're getting that in real time. The other thing is it gives you best practice benchmarking. So it saves you having to guess whether your tenant is secured and whether it's properly configured. And it's going to give you a benchmark against things like Cyber Essentials and the NCSE standards and the gold standard that Xperience has created. So why does it matter? Well, there are 3.7 million companies using 365. There's 345 million users logged into 365, which makes it a very attractive prospect for hackers. So it gets a lot of focus from threat actors and the threat community. And with the rate that threats are evolving, you need to make sure that you have an automated way of dealing with them. So a threat comes up, Microsoft releases a new policy, it needs to be implemented and it needs to be automated, because you and we cannot manually stay on top of all of these changes. Two great things: it ensures compliance with given standards, as we said, so something like Cyber Essentials, and it then means that your audits are really simple and straightforward. When it comes to being audited, actually all of it is built into the tenant and you can show that real time, which actually means then that if you've got regulatory requirements or insurance needs, if you need to show your cyber insurer that you have these things switched on, you need to give evidence that it's being done, then absolutely you can do that. So what's happening next? Well, actually, the rollout begins in November, so you don't need to do anything. It'll automatically be rolled out. You'll be enrolled within that. There is an early opt-in available, so if what you've heard today is appealing to you, if you'd like to get protection in place earlier than November, then reach out to your account manager and we can absolutely put that in place. Once we've got it deployed, we will benchmark against the baseline. So we'll work out where you stand in that assessment, where you need to make changes. And importantly, before we make any changes to your tenant, before we make any changes to your live environment, we'll communicate that with you and manage it. So there should be no disruption, but we will communicate any changes. And the key thing here is you're going to get a very rapid view of where your security profile stands versus that benchmark. And then the final point is that in December, your bill will go up by £100 a month. And that will be automatically billed. So that's what's happening next. There are questions that we've been asked by customers that we've already had this conversation with. So James, the first question here is there anything anyone needs to do to get this rolled out?
Thank you, Spencer. So there isn't anything anyone needs to do. You will be auto-enrolled into the tooling in late November. However, as Spencer said, if you would like to have Inforcer in place earlier than that, you can reach out to either myself or your account managers, Max or Andy, etc., and we can put that into process for you.
Cool. Okay, so the other question that we've got, which I did touch on the previous slide, is will there be any downtime for our business or our users who are trying to get on with their work?
Okay, so when we implement Inforcer, there will be no downtime whatsoever. Going forward, there may be suggestions that we want to make or policies that we need to implement, which we will discuss with you directly, but to actually implement Inforcer, there will be no downtime.
Okay, well, that's good. That's good to hear. And then the final point here is, what changes will people see introduced when this gets switched on?
Sure. So when we roll the tooling out, we will review and benchmark all of your 365 tenants against the Inforcer baselines that were mentioned earlier. We'll use the reports we'll show your account manager, and we'll provide those to you. And we'll walk through the information that's presented, advising you on the key pieces such as your security score, which we talked about earlier, and making any recommendations needed. So all of that reporting will be available to you once the system is in place.
Okay.
The tooling will also help us to identify any areas your Microsoft licensing, which is really key to this, where you're not fully utilizing. You may have spare licenses, etc. And again, we'll provide that information to you in report format, and account managers will be on hand to advise on what that means and any actions that need to be taken to ensure you're getting the most out of your existing investment. So thank you, Spencer and Will. Let me just see if I can take control again. Yeah. So that kind of wraps us up for today. The threat landscape will continue to evolve, but so will Xperience. So with Inforcer, we're putting in place tooling to help mitigate against those risks and the evolving threat landscape is having on all of our businesses. I'd like to thank you all for joining today, and we really hope you found the session valuable and informative. And thank you again to our speakers today, Spencer and Will. This session has been recorded, so you'll shortly receive a copy of the recording and the slide deck used today. Hope you all enjoy the rest of your day, and thank you everyone for joining. Thank you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Thanks very much.
you.